The National Film and Video Foundation is an agency of the Department of Arts and Culture that was created with the sole purpose to ignite stories of the South African film industry. It's a story about nurturing uniquely South African narratives through the funding of the development, production, marketing and distribution of films, festival hosting, market and festivals attendance, as well as the training and development of aspiring filmmakers. Our story is about igniting your stories, and we will continue to do so for as long as South Africans have stories to tell. In the past financial year, our story moved in leaps and bounds as we pursued transformation and development across all spheres of the industry. We will continue to play a leading role in addressing the needs of our stakeholders and the broader film community. Our focus towards the growth of youth and women in the industry has yielded positive results through partnerships with various provinces, strategic entities, and community interventions. The National Film and Video Foundation remains committed to fueling the industry. We congratulate all the South Africans who have received both local and international accolades. We assure the industry that we will continually adhere to our duty of implementing strategic priorities with integrity, working towards improving the quality of life for every South African while promoting equality, all through the power of the visual medium.
It's my pleasure to honor a woman who has opened her doors to hundreds of vulnerable children over the years. A woman who is a true inspiration, a woman who is a national hero.
I want the best for you as your mother.
A woman by the name of Mary Ndlovu. It's my honor to award you with Community Builder of the Year. I've done everything you've asked for. Everything.
Many, many blessings. He's going to die.
I'm only doing God's work, that's all.
I know what it is like to grow up without love. Thank you. No one will stand in my way. Do your job.
Look, if I'm being honest, he is hot.
Inkinga yakhe kwakuwukuthi lo wesifazane wona bazalwane ngoba siyona ungihlobeleza abantu bazothina abantu.
Thembeka ngiyamthanda ayikho into wrong esiyenzile.
Thembeka ngiyamthanda. Wazini ngothando wena?
Butso ndi hore ini niko pfanena kana ndinombuza zwa uri ndi nnyi. Nne ndi khosi apa.
Niko mfela.
Vatongwana luperane ri va kontota.
Zvino vambudza uri ndiyone nzira inthihi fhedzi.
Utela khosi.
Mutani, chinarato chishumisai ni chivindi cha kholomo.
Auri yangu tea ukulisiwa.
Ndipe imwe nzira yakuita nayo. Ute otuwa hoyo.
Naune ndikofana wana ndira ya uri ndingamubulaya.
A very good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this discussion hosted by the National Film and Video Foundation. My name is Kanyima Kubane, and I'm going to be your facilitator today. And please do feel free, of course, to send us your questions to those who are joining us on YouTube as well as Facebook. Welcome to you, and it is a full house today. Okay, we have got amazing, influential powerhouses, movers and shakers. I'm going to tell you who we joined by this afternoon, and then I'm going to hand over to the ladies to really do their own short introductions and also just tell us what it is that they are expecting from the discussion. I'm going to start by introducing myself. As I said, my name is Kanyima Kubane, and I've been in the industry for 20 years now. I started my journey as a journalist. I am a trained journalist, and I've worked for different stations like 702, YFM, SAFM, and I also work as a entrepreneur. I own a production company called Zinogwanda Media and Communication. As a producer, I've produced documentaries, socio-political documentaries, socio-economic documentaries. I've produced talk shows, and I've really been in non-fiction around documentaries and docuseries for a long time, but recently, in recent years, got into fiction, where I've produced some work for Mzansi Magic. And let me tell you who we are joined by this afternoon. Like I said, it's a full house. I don't know what it would be like if we were all seated together around the lounge. lounge, okay, in one space and trying to control everybody, especially once everybody gets passionate. But I'll do my best, to make sure that it doesn't get too chaotic. But please do, send those questions coming. We are joined this afternoon by Zanele Mthembu. She is the Swift chairperson, and she's also a producer, and she's been in the industry for many years. A very good afternoon to you, Zanele. Can you just wave there? We've got Thandi Davids. She is an executive director, and she's also the deputy chairperson of the Independent Producers Organization. Thandi? All right, we've got Dr. Nwabi Sashai. She's a specialist scientist in the Gender and Health Research Unit at the Medical Research Council. A very good afternoon to you too. And we've got Azrami Training, well-known actress, award-winning actress, and she's also an author. And I'd like to call her an industry activist as well, because we all know Rami is not afraid to use her voice and her platforms to speak out and really walk the road less traveled. She's not a sheep following the crowd. She stands up, and we'll get more into those issues. And we've also got LALA. She's an executive producer, as well as the director of the Africa Rising International Film Festival. So why are we gathered here today? Our discussion is entitled, I Am My Sister's Keeper. And it may sound very warm and fuzzy on the surface, but it really is something that speaks to responsibility and solidarity, because it's easy to be your sister's keeper in good times, but can you be your sister's keeper, in the bad times, in the times where it's challenging, in the times where it's unpopular, in the times where you yourself personally, may risk your own career and your own ability to work in the industry? And what does it mean when we say, I am my sister's keeper? So by way of just opening up the discussion, I'm going to ask Dr. Nabisa Shai to start us off and do a brief introduction of herself, but also by way of opening our discussion, also go into issues of the psyche of an abused individual, an abused woman, somebody that has, experienced psychological trauma as a result of GBV, because I think it's important for us to start there, because, it's not just a physical occurrence to a person. Abuse, sexual harassment in all its forms really is very psychological. Dr. Nabisa, perhaps I'll start with you to just open our discussion.
Thank you, Kanye. Thank you for having me. I hope that my network will stay strong. I work as a researcher for a unit called the Gender and Health Research Unit at the South African Medical Research Council. A lot of the work we do is around gender-based violence, trying to understand what is gender-based violence and also the extent of violence, but also we are working on understanding how to prevent gender-based violence. And we do a lot of work developing interventions, testing those in different settings. And I have been part of translating the work we've been doing to support the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence that was launched in April this year, supporting, for example, Solidarity Fund with the work that they were doing on trying to strategize around an effective catalytic response to gender-based violence. I work with NGOs that are providing services, particularly prevention services. And to get to your question, Kanye, about the psyche of women who have been abused, I would describe a woman who has been abused as a woman who perhaps has not disclosed her experiences, as someone who is perhaps hiding her experiences and perhaps also shielding the image of the man who has abused her. And she does this because society has told her that intimate partner violence specifically and sexual violence, that they are ashamed, that they are hidden, that they should not be talking about them in public. They should not be airing their dirty laundry in public. And this is how society then creates a situation where the woman then blames herself. She sees herself as being stigmatized even before other people speak. And even when people do speak about her situation, they may often stigmatize her, but the self-blame comes from how she sees herself as being the problem that resulted in the abuse that she experienced. I'll stop now.
Sorry, go ahead.
Now, I was suggesting that maybe I should stop there for now.
Okay, perfect. I'd like to then also bring on board Zanele Mthembu. She is the president of SWIFT, which stands for Sisters Working in Film and Television. You'll start by just introducing yourself very briefly, and then my question to you, Sis Zanele, just off the back of what Dr. Nobisa was talking about, that, you know, the psyche of a woman who has been abused or has been exposed to you know, gender-based violence is somebody who, number one, is not confident to come out and speak up, and is somebody who also fears. There's a lot of fear. What will happen? Will I still have a job? Will I still be safe? Will I still be covered? And this, of course, is the reason why SWIFT in many ways was instrumental in coming up with this document, which is the Code of Good Practice, Handling Sexual Harassment in the Film and TV Industry, which really seeks to bring a sense of regulation to it. Perhaps just talk to us in terms of how this document goes a long way in terms of encouraging victims to come up, or survivors. I don't want to call them victims, but survivors to come out, you know, because there is a sense of a good a code of good practice. There is there that we can look at as a sort of a reference.
Hi, Kanye. Thank you for that introduction and the question. Zanele Mthembu has been, now I'm talking about myself in the third person. I've been in the industry for over 25 years, and I started at Penguin Films as a director and you know, a writer of factual content, stuff that was broadcast on SABC, and I will date myself here, but that's back in the days of Good Morning South Africa. Let's leave it there. And then I moved on. Yes, many moons ago. That's when I started. And then I had the opportunity to then go and actually work for Discovery Communications while I studied for my master's in Washington, D.C. And I was with them for close to 9 years, almost 10 years. And I worked in various departments. Mainly the aim was to really understand the business of broadcasting. And then upon my return to South Africa, I joined ETV, starting off as an executive producer in local content, and then moving on eventually to group head of the content division, where I had oversight of content, factual content for distribution, international distribution of that factual content. Then moved on to work with Newsroom Africa, you know, formed the team that bid for the channel, and also in setting up the channel as their first executive head of channel. And now I've gone back to the independent space because my aim really is to empower young women, to share my experiences with them, and to be able to pass on, you know, our experiences and really lessons from being in this industry. And that's part of the reason why I'm part of SWIFT now. To answer your question, really, yes, definitely, you know, the code of good practice. A lot of women, unfortunately, don't know about the existence of this document. And this document is really informed by the law, you know, so it's based on it's founded on the Employment Equity Act. That's the foundation of it. So when women come out and speak against sexual harassment, they are actually backed by law. First and foremost, I think that's something that we need to clarify, that there is a basis in law for actually coming out. So the Code of Good Practice is based on the law. It is informed by the law, which is under the Employment Equity Act. So that law empowers us to be, as women, to be able to speak out. It informs us, it empowers us to know what we can say and how we can say it, what sexual harassment is, how we can go about reporting sexual harassment in the workplace. So it is a document that is very important that us as women, first of all, know about, so that we can go back to production companies that are not enforcing this code to say to them, here is a code that is based in law that you need to enforce in the company. You need to have in your company or on the production when we come on board to come and work on production. They can insist on it because it is informed by law. It is not just something that we thought of. And that code helps production companies to know exactly how they should be handling sexual harassment in the workplace.
Now, just to bring you in, Tandy, I'd like to bring you in here to firstly tell us a little bit more about yourself, but just also off the back of what Zanele is saying, as independent producers, we know that there's what happens on paper and then there's what happens in practice. All right, and what happens in practice is that we're running productions as producers with cast men and women. They've got roles to play. There's crew. There's, a lot of people who congregate in one space. Okay, let's talk about from a producer's perspective. How easy or difficult do you think it has been for producers to really admit that there is a problem of sexual harassment and women harassment on sets, and that, time has come for us to no longer just turn, the other eye, but also face it head on and say, if somebody has to leave a production in order for women to feel safe, then that's what must happen. What are some of, for instance, some of the steps in supporting this has organizations like the IPO played, and that perhaps you've also seen in your own space where you work?
Great. So I have been in the media industry for 20 to 25 years across various sectors of it. I started PR, so I come from with a marketing background. I worked with the Independent Broadcasting Authority, which is more policy focused, and then went to start up Fox National Geographic channels in South Africa, where I ran and managed 11 TV channels, launched 6 into the market. I'm now the executive producer at Storyscope, my production company, and serve as the deputy chair on the IPO board, amongst others. I think, look, this issue of sexual harassment and how production houses and producers deal with it is important. It's as we know through social media, we've seen more and more women speaking up, which is incredibly important. I think hashtag #MeToo has really opened up a dialogue within the sector. It's become more important because there are more of us in the industry. There are more of us as producers. There are more of us as directors. We are now back of camera in a way that we've never been back of camera before. And being back of camera means that we've got much more of a voice and an ability to engage and to steer how we handle issues that are specifically very gender related, this being one of them. The IPO, I think that, I don't think there's particularly been, until Swift really came along, there wasn't really a particular standard for the industry. There are a number of problems in terms of the way that even the law presently is written for producers. If you work full-time for my production company, there's a very systematic and clear way as to how within that production company I can deal with 2 staff members who are my full-time employees. But if I am on a set or I'm in a show, if I could put that way, I'm on a production, I'm very often dealing with a large number of freelancers, the crew of freelancers very often, my cast of freelancers very often, and that presents a whole other set of problems in terms of how, from a legal framework, you can deal with issues of such as sexual harassment. I know of 2 cases very recently where the person who was accused resigned off the production. What then happens? What's the outcome for the person who's complained? Because once that person's resigned from the production house is sitting in between a rock and a hard place. They no longer work for them. How do we move forward? So I think what's happening is the engagement is absolutely there. I know the IPO has been dealing with SWIFT. The women we have, because we have more women sitting inside the IPO on the ExCo level, it's become a fairly key issue for us to make sure that we have these protocols in place and we're taking care of everything. But for producers, this doesn't start on set. I think the cases that have been highlighted recently tend to be very celebrity driven. They have a voice and a platform. And they tend to be people who are on set, where things are happening on set. This problem is endemic, and it starts literally from day one. It starts with producers themselves. It goes into writing rooms. That there's a reason why something is called the casting couch, for example. So part of these problems are, when we look at this, we have to look at this to the entire value chain, from the moment we start working on a project and development all the way through to our post-production, because things are happening in post-production suites at the same time as well. So there has to be some clear and careful thinking, and we need to understand as producers that when we commit to this, we need to commit to it from day one of developing this production. It's key that we have more female voices because we're there, we understand, we look out for each other on a lot of levels, and we try and make sure that these rules are in place and we've got ways to move forward in relation to that. So yeah, I mean, I think producers are understanding. I think that we're starting to take steps. There may be baby steps, but there are places that we have gaps in, and that we're working with SWIFT to try and see how we fill those gaps up, so that we've got freelancers, people who aren't physically employed by a production house, who've got ways and mechanisms to be able to take a case from complaint all the way through to sanction, if that's what needs to happen. So I think that's there. The other key thing I think also in terms of all of this is how we write stories, because we talk very often around what's happening in the production process, but it's also how we represent ourselves and our voices on screen that become important. So we can talk about gender-based violence and how that impacts people working in the industry, but what stories are we telling and what storylines are we telling? And if we're dealing with intimate scenes, for example, are these being written and crafted by women or have input from women so they become realistic and take a woman's voice into consideration? Or is it just a male director and a male scriptwriter who's imagining what it is we think and feel? So I think that this discussion is broader than just the actual mechanisms inside production, but physically what we're actually throwing out and what we're showing to the world in terms of who we are as women and how we are presented on screen too.
Thank you, Tandy. I want to bring you in here, Lala, just very much in the same, tune as a producer. You're an executive producer currently on a telenovela, Isono, and of course you produced other shows. When we speak about the safety of women on set, when we speak about dealing with issues of sexual harassment, what do you think as producers needs to be done in terms of being able to have a backbone and stand up with the victims, not so much in terms of taking sides, but making them feel heard, making them feel that when you stand up or when you speak up, your case will be taken seriously? Because one of the biggest complaints that those who've stepped up have complained about, and it's almost a pattern, is that it's not just once or twice that I've spoken to production or producers. I've spoken once, twice, three times, and it's only when I go to social media to speak about these cases that suddenly now, there's action, but my producer knew, and she swept it under the table, or he swept it under the table because it's a big star. We need him for the show, he carries the show, he's got a name, and your complaint is going to come in the way of what we're trying to create here. Talk to us about, those conundrums or those moral and ethical dilemmas that producers are faced with.
Thank you so much, Kanye, for that question, and good afternoon to everyone. Just by way of introduction, my name is LALA DUKU. I ventured into the media industry and entertainment industry at a very young age. I was a tender 13-year-old dancing at, downtown Newtown, and really had an amazing, experience in the creative space. And I then studied formally, went to National School of the Arts, and then further went to AFDA. At that particular time, people don't see our craft firstly as something serious, as that it can be a career. So that in itself was the first thing. And then I, majored in directing at EFTA. Just to give you a bit of background, majored in directing at EFTA. And when I entered the industry, I was told that there are no, female directors, let alone Black, and so I should act. And I went obviously into the performing space, which is something that I was particularly familiar with. And it was within 3 years of being in the space that, I started to quickly see the imbalances of power on set. And the places that women, young women, old women are put into. At that time, it didn't have a name. It was not vocalized. As Thandi said, there are more people speaking now. So one is more, prompted to come up and speak. At that time, it wasn't. And I remember correctly walking out of set because of what I was made to feel like. And I think we need to, make sure that we're all on the same page when we speak about sexual harassment and behavior. And, inappropriate touching, invasion of privacy, sexual jokes, obscure comments. So all those things that we all need to be clear about when we speak about this, that young women and any woman that's on set gets to understand what is it that, we speak of. I then went, changed careers completely due to this and went and studied a marketing and comms degree and found myself a few years later at the NFVF. So I had the privilege of working at the NFVF, a really great a company that being entrenched in it started to show me, the gaps that exist in the industry. And that really started to, enhance my knowledge in terms of what is it that we need to do to address the very problematic areas that are in the industry. I ventured then into the business side of it. And yes, as you said, I am an exec producer producing the upcoming Isono BET coming show. And your question is important in terms of what is it that, makes women not come up and speak? And what is it that we are faced with? And what is it that we need to do? And I think today's topic squarely speaks to that. I am my sister's keeper really starts to delve into what is the responsibility. And we need to make sure that the safety of women on our set is a non-negotiable condition. Women don't come forth, as you say, because number one, they perhaps feel a certain sense of shame. So they don't come up because of that. They also don't come up because they think maybe they might not be believed. So those that come up, we have to know that that is the tip of the iceberg. And those that have had the courage to come up and speak out, that is, I read a study once that says it is 3 out of 4 women that don't speak out. So, those cases that we've seen on social media of young women coming out now, there are 3 others out of that 4 that haven't said anything. So what is the responsibility of a producer on that set? And, it's important for us to, as soon as, the first thing that we always do, the minute we start on any production, the safety of women is critical. And, we engaged with Swift. We even worked on the, Zanele, the intimacy coaching. Before we started shooting, we actually took our cast and crew members in terms of what does that mean and what does it look like. So there's a lot of education that still needs to happen because we find that there are people who still don't understand what is this thing, what does it look like. I'm made to feel a certain way. So there's important conversations. So for me, I think the important thing is for us to have robust conversations. These kind of conversations are important that can bring light to this thing. But it is our responsibility and to act swiftly and to believe and with no, with absolute certainty is to make sure that those sets are safe and that women can, knock at the door, even if they find me or find a male counterpart. It is our responsibility, both men and women, producers, black and white, to make sure that our sets are safe, and it's a non-negotiable.
Rami, on that issue of sets, you've been on many sets in your lifetime as an actress, you know, acting in many capacities, and you've heard what the producers are saying, you know, and we've talked about the code of good practice that's been released by Swift. Do you think that, you know, the movement that has started, let's say in the past 12 to 18 months with the Me Too, and it has grown and increased with momentum, is it because there are more cases of women harassment on set that are happening now, or has it always happened and people have just kept quiet, and it's only now in the recent years, or in the recent year and a half to two, that women are finally having the courage to speak up? We've got platforms that are powerful and influential like social media. Has this been something you've personally seen and experienced on many sets over many years? Please unmute your mic.
Eish, why is it not automatic? That's just going to just sense that I need to speak now and just, you know, go off.
Yes.
Yeah, but thank you so much. What a beautiful afternoon this is, and, you know, to just share platform with these amazing ladies. And, you know, going back to what you're saying, it's something that has been going on for years, you know, and I think the silence was because there were no support structures and women didn't know how to actually go about it. Most of them actually thought that is how work is being sourced out, that if you want a role, a big role, a prominent role, and if you want to last in the industry, there has to be something that you use to pay back. And most of the time, it is sexual favors, you know?
You give me something to get something.
Yeah, give something to get something, which is now one of the reasons why most of the women who are have experienced sexual harassment are not able to come through, is because when they look back on their cases, they go like, "Ish, but I was actually paying back, so I can't now go back and say I was coerced because I actually said yes because I wanted a job. Had I said no, I wouldn't be where I am." So it is very difficult now for women to weigh that, okay, how do I now turn around and say that was sexual assault or I was sexually abused, you know? And now I'm glad that the organizations are out there. People are now starting to get their own voices, finding their own voices, coming out, speaking to their sisters, speaking to different, to their bosses who are willing to listen, to say, listen, I'm in a bit of a mission and I'm not sure how to treat this. Because, you know, when someone has mistreated you, there is a feeling, there's that gut feeling that you get, even when you're not sure. There's a level of uneasiness that says you were not comfortable. And that discomfort, that's where you know that it is not the way that I would have wanted it to go. And obviously we are trying all the time to encourage women and make sure that, you know, they feel strong, they feel confident coming on to set. And Lala, as Lala was saying, I'm on Isono, yay, you must watch us. And that is one of the things that we did first as well. We got someone to come and do intimate coaching. And I know that education is important because I know a lot of men intentionally do it. They intentionally go out to be sexual predators, to abuse women, to assault women. But there are some other ones that they don't even know that what they're doing is actually invasion of privacy, is making your colleague uncomfortable, which is why intimacy coaching is important. And where you get to say, you can't, I know we all use words of endearment, but you can't just go around calling everybody baby. And if it makes someone feel uncomfortable, you need to, not everyone can be your sweetie, your honey, your movie, your money. And, you know, you start complimenting their body parts in different ways that actually makes them and people around them uncomfortable. So it is important. And I love the fact that now organizations are coming out, movements are coming out. Swift, we've got those the code of conduct and all of that coming through. And another step that I would love to see is actually seeing sexual conduct or intimacy being included properly in a contract where individuals actually get to sign it and say, these are the laws. Should you contravene this would be some of the results, because most of the entertainment industry in particular, most of the cases, they don't make it to court, and you get people on social media dragging you. Oh yeah, if it's a crime, why are you not getting someone arrested? You know, it is not as easy as it sounds. Other people, they don't need to get arrested, but there are different ways where we can act accordingly, where we can get into a room, there's mediation, counseling, and where the production can actually say, excuse me, sir, we don't need to get you arrested. But according to the conduct that we've stated and that you have signed as part of your contract, you have contravened someone's rights and you've contravened those laws, and we need to make them as effectively, as immediately as possible, because a lot of cases are falling through the cracks, and you end up having women being uncomfortable, and you end up giving, turning the blind eye, and just pushing the passion, because you also need to have something to put on your table. But the cases are not getting smaller. But I'm glad that the numbers in people speaking out are getting higher. And this is what we need to push, the agenda that we need to push. And I know productions, sometimes they're under pressure because a good actor is a good actor. We can't now, we've been talking about it. We can't now we can't get rid of a lead because they bring ratings. They are amazing. But even in their amazing state, we need to understand that there are misconducts that are completely unacceptable. And if you are not going to treat yourself and treat each other and be responsible and accountable and be respectable, then you have no place in the industry. You have no place irrespective of how talented you are. And yes, jobs must be taken away. And I know yesterday someone was like, so are you saying this person mustn't work? And I said, yes, they mustn't. They must not work. I know it sounds harsh, but we need to be harsh right now. Like it's guys, the sooner, the better, because it's completely getting out of hand.
Let me bring Bongi in here. In one of the opening comments, and Bongi, you'll just start by introducing yourself. And the question that I'd like to pose to you, Bongi, is, I think it was Tandy that said that when we look at the safety of women in the television and film industry, it's not just during moments of principal photography when we are shooting, pre-production, those casting cultures, those getting the jobs, but you're in the post-production space. After the footage has been shot, after everybody's gone home, you're now creating this product. And as a woman editor, you are not any less exposed or less likely to be in danger. You also face the very same, risk factors, because you're sitting one-on-one, with a male producer, a director, or whoever the case may be. You also are facing some of those, instances where a person could be in danger as a woman in the industry. Perhaps just share with us, some of your own experiences of, stories that, you've encountered, stories that you've heard, or just how you perhaps see, yourself as a practitioner in the industry, also at risk, even though you are not physically on set as maybe actors would be.
Thank you so much. I feel honored to be amongst all these powerful women. I've been in the industry for 15 years. I spent 10 years as an assistant editor because I believe we can easily be economically excluded. So my experience is not so much gender-based. I've worked with very great women and men. Our spaces is not as crowded as on set. So I think as an assistant editor when I was young, you are forced to work in an environment that is just not healthy in terms of machines that you are working with, the time that you are given to do the work. So now you come into this space as a junior, it's your first job, you are willing to do anything to make it work, yet you don't have even the education. You must remember what you learned at school and what you are doing in the work environment is totally different. So you are just told that this is just a copy and paste thing. That's what you would think. And the money is so small, but that's where you will start. Now you take this job, not even knowing anything. You don't even have the support. You're working at night. And when you get stuck, you have to wait till maybe 9 a.m. With the work. But that's not the main problem. The problem is when you are working those nights and then the only time you can go home is at 5 in the morning when the first taxi is available. And most of the time you are working alone with another security guard or a technician, a male technician. The psychological abuse, that economical and psychological abuse that I feel I faced when I was younger is that I'm getting stuck. Is that you want to make it. You are in a great show. The passion is pulling you in, and these people make jokes. The men, they make jokes that are so uncomfortable, and you're just forced to follow and just laugh at this joke that makes you uncomfortable, that makes you anxious, but you just want to keep the job, and there's no support, not from the producer, as far as I'm concerned. And then you just keep at it. You have no choice. But I've spent that 10 years as an assistant because of the exclusion and so many things. And now in the last 4 years, I've made strides. And then you find out that what people are writing and how directors go to shoot it and what they are bringing into the editing room, it's like, what's the word? It's too boxed. Like, is that how we are going to portray women? Should men say this about us? Can I cut this out? Then you don't have that much freedom to say what or do as much as you can. I feel like in post, we are really, like I said, the environment, the time constraints, and the egos. As a woman, I don't think there's enough voice for people in post-production.
Oh, and I'm sure even just in terms of trusting your work, I know, producers, male producers who won't work with a female editor, simply because they don't trust she can cut as well as a guy can. Those are just perhaps some of the issues, that are there just in terms of, crafting an industry that takes us as equals, whether we are all producers, directors, writers, that says, LALA as an exec for a show is just as good as a guy who's as an exec as a show. And of course, there's issues of, but women are emotional, they're emotional on set. Of course, we are emotional. God created us like this, but our emotions make us unique. And I think, what has happened is that women feel as if they need to alter their personalities to fit into the boys' club. To say, once I'm an executive producer, now I'm no longer that girl next door. Now I've got to fit into a type of a box and a stereotype. Ladies, now that we've kind of like set the scene and everybody has really had a chance to go around, I really want to get into the issues with a little bit more depth. Zanele, let me come back to you. Sisters working in film and television, you've been at the forefront of championing the cause of women being safe on set. You've produced booklets, you've produced the Code of Good Practice. How have you engaged channels, for instance, like whether it's SABC, whether it's Mnet, Mzansi Magic, just in terms of saying that as a channel, we will not accept, programs that have actors that are harassing other actresses or on set, are channels as invested, or they are just looking for a final product? How you give it to them, what the conditions are, that get into play before that product is delivered, they wouldn't really care. Do you find that channels are invested in the safety of women on set?
Thank you for that question. channels are actually invested because there is a lot of pressure from the channels. And I'll take us a little bit before I answer your question. I mean, look at where we are now with COVID, right? Channels, even though initially they were not willing to come to the party in terms of financially supporting producers to make sure that the work environment is safe enough to continue with production so that they can have a product on air. But without having these conditions in place, it actually affects them, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. It affects them, it affects how the product gets to them and when the product gets to them. So channels are invested. We've had discussions and continue to have discussions with a number of channels. For instance, the SABC has adopted the code of good practice. It is a government entity, and we know there's a lot of red tape, but we continue to engage with them to ensure that we get to a point where there is implementation. We have been invited as SWIFT, for instance, and by the way, SABC does sit on committees that were formed to discuss how we move forward with the next step of the code of sexual harassment and reporting cases of sexual harassment. But they have adopted the code. They are including in their contracts the code. It may not be exactly what the SWIFT code of good practice looks like, because it can be adapted, since it's based in law. They have adopted that. We're working with them in terms of playing the PSAs. And we were just before COVID, we were in the process of finalizing the airing of these PSAs. That's not okay PSAs. So they are involved. We have multi-choice, Mnet, let me put it that way. Mnet, we've partnered with them. They even funded the That's Not Okay PSAs. So they are aware of what needs to change in the industry. It is a matter of implementation. But remember that the broadcasters, they are the guys who hold the keys to the funding. And that's where we need to push, and that's where we really need to engage, because if they don't release the funding because producers are not doing what they're supposed to do, it then has the effect of that we need to see happen. That's why we're engaging them. We've engaged with the NFVF. They have adopted the code. So all the entities that control the funding, that's who we are engaging with, because we understand and we appreciate that when the taps stop flowing of funding, that's when producers really can start changing things. Without that happening, honestly, there's no other lever that we can use to change producers. So that's why we're engaging with broadcasters, with all funding, whether government or non-government entities, in order to make sure that they do implement this code. Because we know very well that's where the power lies. The power lies with the people that have the funds.
Now, my question is, why is there a type of a reluctance for this code of good practice to be compulsory? Like, I think it was Rami who said, as part, or one of the speakers who said, as part of your contract. So in other words, as production houses, you know that you have documentation you must submit to channel before you start, production, whether it's your audition tapes, your call sheets, your scripts. If there's going to be 40 people on your set that are involved in your production, why can't we have 40 pieces of contracts, of code of good practice that have been signed before we start, to say, if a gaffer hasn't signed this, he cannot go on set. If an actor hasn't signed this, he cannot go on set. If a makeup artist or a head of wardrobe hasn't signed this, he cannot go on set. Why is it not an addendum or an annex charge to every contract, which must be seen and greenlit by a commissioning editor, by channel, so that we know that as we start on day one of shooting, it is covered and that everybody knows exactly where we stand?
Well, there are various layers, and you have alluded to them. There's the broadcaster that we engage with, and the broadcaster engages with the production company. The production company has to ensure implementation of that on the ground. And I'm sure Tandy will speak to this as well. And that's why we're engaging with organizations as well, like the IPO. And of course, we know there are producers that are like rogue units running around, not belonging anywhere, and no one can hold them to account, But with organizations like the IPO, they are beginning to implement that and have implemented that and have engaged with SWIFT and continue to engage with SWIFT in terms of what they can do, even inviting us to facilitate workshops on sexual harassment. So I will let the producers who actually have to implement this perhaps explain from their side where the hiccups are, where the stumbling blocks are, because we are doing as an advocacy group, we are doing what we need to do. We just need to make sure that the producers, the broadcasters, and all those that are in charge implement, because that's where the challenge is. It's in the implementation. And unfortunately, we are not part of the implementation. We create the awareness, we provide the tools, we educate the women in the industry. But when it comes to implementation, the producers need to take that responsibility. We can always encourage them and engage with them, but they have to take the responsibility to do that. Before I hand over to Tandy, perhaps, sorry, Kanye, I'm now taking over your in terms of who's supposed to respond next. But what is important for us, as we're talking about being my sister's keeper. SWIFT, what we really want women to be aware of is that they have tools at their disposal. One thing that we need to really know is that without the information, without the knowledge, we are not able to go to the producer and say to the producer, why do we not have this clause in our agreement? So it's a two-way stream. We need to be informed. We need to know what is out there so that we can go then to the producers and say to them, there is a code of good practice. Why are you not implementing it? And that is the work that SWIFT is busy with, the work of educating and empowering women through the code of good practice, but even the sexual harassment guide. I mean, you'll be surprised how many women in the past weeks have come to us, know nothing about the sexual harassment guide. And that is where, being my sister's keeper, I am saying to the sisters, join organizations, because the reason we do not know the things we don't know is because we do not belong anywhere. There is power in terms of women networking and stuff like that. You don't want to be alone and caught alone outside of a group. There's power in terms of just us coming together and belonging somewhere, so that we're able to know some of these things that it's not easy to know when you are outside on your own and isolated on your own.
Tandy, before I bring you in, I just want to make you guys aware that we do have questions that have been coming in from audiences that have been watching on YouTube and on Facebook. And Tandy, after your response, I'm going to come back and just bring in some of those questions from our audiences so that they're also engaging, some of their thoughts as they are listening to that. Tandy, how easy or difficult is it for producers and production houses overall to adopt this code of good practice as an almost compulsory, occurrence that has to happen before any production starts?
So I think, these are the number of codes of conduct and practices that we're looking at. From the IPO's perspective, let me firstly say, the key thing is that I, as the deputy chair of the IPO, we can only look at those people who are members of the IPO to kind of buy into and to enforce and to sign up to codes. They have to be members of the IPO. If they're not members of the IPO, we've got no recourse in any shape or form in terms of what their behavior is or isn't. From our side, there are a number of things we're practically doing at this point in time. We are presently in negotiations. We've got a broadcast subcommittee that's presently in negotiations with SAGA, with WGSA, with the various industry bodies and guilds, to look very simply at actually putting this into contracts, so that there has to be a standardized system that goes into contracts and people sign into their contracts. So those negotiations are presently underway, and they're underway with various organizations, that I said, to ensure that we're all on track in terms of that. And what that will mean for IPO members is that when your contract goes out to anyone, these have to be attached into the back end of your contract. So we're working quite hard to make sure that happens, which is the first thing from a contractual perspective. The second thing is to, even though it isn't in the contract, is to try and find ways that people can complain, ways that are structured within the sector. Because as I said earlier on, sometimes from a legal perspective, the production house is not in the position to be able to manage a particular process. So between all of our guilds, Swift included, we're trying to find almost third party, an organization or an office that will permit people to be able to go there and to complain. If you can't complain to me from an IPO perspective because it's not a member, that this body kind of sits over the industry and you can go complain about, as Anila called it, a rogue producer who's not doing what they need to do. But this is why guilds are important, I think, and I think as Anila was saying, why people should belong to some kind of guild, because there is that ability to collectively bargain, and because we do end up going into agreements and relationships from that perspective. I also just want to point out, because we have been talking a lot about everyone under the producer, there are also female producers, and female producers also go through this. You know, I have no female producers who have been propositioned by commissioning editors. So this is not something that we can just sit down and say, oh, it's everyone, it's from the producer down, and the producer must sort this problem out. It is so systemic that even female producers do not have a place to go to deal with these particular issues. So as women across the entire value chain, from producer to cleaner on set, we are having problems in relation to this. Yeah. And we do have to work together. And I think as industry bodies come together and make sure that we find in ways in which, A, it's written into contract, B, we have a complaint system and mechanism that yes, can go to the production house, but is also independent of production houses, and that people, there's sanction. If you misbehave, you need to go into a blacklist if need be. There needs to be some way that we know what is going on for women throughout the value chain.
Lala, I want to bring you in here. Go ahead. I can see you're itching to say something because, you know, you are taking this space quite a lot.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I know we want to go and engage. You know, I just wanted to offer this to the table. Us dealing with COVID, and I think Zanele was just talking to COVID, made me realize that when we want to do something, we can do it. Yeah. Like, we had to make amendments to contracts regarding COVID. You will not walk on set if you do not have a mask. You will have to sanitize. Here are the protocols. We have Zoom meetings to teach each other about COVID. I then started to think to myself, this is a society that doesn't want to learn how to treat women, because if we wanted to, we could do it. And for me, I think it starts right at the top, from even policy formation. Our policies are not gender sensitive. And so it will draw all the way down. And yes, it's easy to say, you know, the producers, but we're liable to a broadcaster who's the client. So their contracts also come in a certain formation. Then it's my responsibility as a producer to go, here's my little HR team, let's put this as an addendum. But again, not everybody's going to do it because we're not all gender sensitive. So I think, you know, what I'd like to offer is, how do we lobby to make sure that we are protected right from the top? And then, because we could do it with COVID. You can't walk out without a mask. That means we can, if we teach each other and we commit and we start, because we've got to unlearn. There's a lot of unlearning. And you're right, Sandy. I could be sitting in a boardroom, there's 5 males, whether they're white or black, and I could be that only female. It will take me 4 times to say my point before my point is heard. It will take a comment to say, oh, do you understand? When they have the technical conversations about which cameras to shoot with, I'm not even considered for a point. And so it is that engendered thing that we've got to learn and unlearn certain things and teach and be robust and have these conversations, because it's not going to, because then I start to then lose confidence, right? I start then not showing up because I think I'm not enough. I'm not for this place. So there's a, you know, it's multi-layered, it's complex. And when we talk about it, we have to make sure that we're talking about the complexity, you know, the complex nature of the entire, you know, value chain. So, you know, even as we discuss, we need to really, I just wanted to put that point across.
All right, before I proceed with other points that I'd like to raise, I just want to bring in some of the questions and comments that some of our audiences have been bringing out. You know, we have one question here, which I think, you know, one of us can address. The question comes from Taryn Leslie, who wants to know, what if something happens to a woman offset, yet it's still during the shooting period with a fellow set member? Is production still responsible for that person? Is that person still to be held liable? So that's a case, I assume, that's happening off the physical set, maybe in accommodation or somewhere else, but it's still within production. And another question is, what happens to the producers that are not members of the IPO? Does this leave crew and cast high and dry if the production companies they are working for are not members of these organizations? Another question coming through from Makwana Eva MK says, the society and the industry must first stop treating women who raise their voices about these issues like psychotic beings, but try and listen and investigate more than just react. Perhaps I want to deal with the case that I think is quite actively happening. What if, and I'll just repeat it for clarity, what if something happens to a woman offset, yet still during the shooting period with a fellow set member? Is production still responsible for that person? Is that person still able to be held liable? I think perhaps one of the producers can take that one. Either you, Zanele, LALA, or Susanele.
Yeah, actually, the Code of Good Practice does say that the producer is accountable. It clearly stipulates exactly what they're supposed to do. And this is where I'd like to really encourage everyone that is watching and listening to go to the SWIFT website for these resources. Firstly, the Code of Good Practice clearly spells out in terms of the Labor Relations Act, in terms of the Employment Equity Act, what the process is, what sexual harassment is, what the process is to report, who is covered by the Code of Good Practice. You know, at first we were not covered as freelancers, we were not covered, but now we are covered. You know, even if a driver, and I think Tandy mentioned this, comes to your set and is working there and harasses somebody on the set or on the production, the producer is liable, unfortunately, for that person because this is their production. But all of that is clearly stipulated in the Code of Good Practice. Also, the Sexual Harassment Guide is another tool that can empower us so that we know exactly, you know, when we experience this, what it is that we're experiencing, whether we can even call it sexual harassment, what we can do about it, and what are the resources that are available to us in order to deal with the problem that we face. So the answer to that is yes, they are still liable. The production company is still unfortunately liable.
Rami, let me bring you in here. You know, when we talk about, you know, being on set or as a production ensemble, you know, people see each other every day. You know, let's say we're shooting for 3-4 months, and, you know, more than not, at some point people start getting comfortable with each other, and they start, you know, being able to dress and dress in each other's faces. You know, you've got to change between scenes. You know, there's a lot that needs to happen. Do you think that the way that sets are set up right now, just in terms of physical space and physical design, that you get to a set and women don't even have their separate dressing areas and men don't have their separate dressing areas, and everybody is just expected to figure it out, whether they go to a nearest bathroom or whatever? Do you think perhaps some of the ways that we are designing our sets also lends itself sometimes to some of these occurrences of sexual harassment that are taking place?
Yeah, in fact, I think getting comfortable and too familiar with each other, that's where sometimes the problem also starts. It's one of the ways that we end up having sexual harassment cases. But I know for a fact that there are a couple of production houses that choose to not cut corners, and they actually invest in spaces, safe spaces, like a good green room with good couches, a table, a tea station, for instance, and then the dressing rooms, because some productions, especially if you're shooting on location, Not everyone will have their own individual dressing rooms, but they will be able to separate and say, that section is for the guys, this other section is for the ladies, and everyone is allocated a particular time. Get 10 minutes, you have your own 10 minutes to change out of your own clothes into your wardrobe, and then you wear your gown, and then they take your stuff and put it away. But I know also that we have those productions that they just put a little gazebo, the one with the 4 walls, that side, and then people must just see to finish. And I think that is, not only does that kind of help with being with the sexual harassment case, but it's also an infringement of your human rights, because you need to be comfortable first with yourself before you can even start considering someone else, that they might be looking at you or eyeing you or having sexual thoughts because now you're undressing in front of them. As someone who's also done theater, I know that one of the things that was tricky is when you do theater, we've got these quick changes. You literally change on the edge of the stage, literally in front of everybody. Dancers, like, there was a point where we were so used to it and we didn't think it was anything. It was just like, that's just how it goes. You know, you walk around with your bare chested and you're wearing a G-string, and you know, everyone is just trying to find their way so we can rush to stage. But now we also needed to implement that thing, like even within the quick change, get 2 assistants on the side to bring a little sheet to cover you, just so that you can quickly change, even though you need to be back on stage in 30 seconds. Even on TV, like for TV as well, we need people who will invest and not cut corners. One of my biggest gripes about production houses is that they will, some of them, the rogue people, they take their profit first, and then they take the money that they want for themselves and hope that they can run a production with what's left over, unfortunately. So now you find that people don't even invest in proper toilets, portable toilets, if we're mobile bathrooms, if we're shooting off location somewhere else. And you find that men and women are sharing the same bathroom. And that is just completely unacceptable. We need people that will understand. And I think it's something that should be put in the code of conduct in terms of production, that for every 10 people that you have on set, you will have a bathroom. For every 5 people, there'll be a dressing room, whatever, you know, I don't know, whatever ratios they want to use, but you can't be having 100 people sharing 1 bathroom and 2 little changing spaces. And then you put a tent and a few chairs and a table, and then you just hope that they will somehow do it. And we used to think that, Carla, we used to think we are being staring. It's for the love of the arts. No, it is completely disrespectful. You still want to work and feel respected so that you can deliver the product the same way that they would want you to be excellent. You still have to demand your human rights have to be respected. And once we start there, then it's easy now to deal with the other secondary thing that would be the sexual harassment. But I also think that cutting corners as production, even as channel, it never works for us. And people need to be accountable. Say, if you're telling people that you're paying Rami 5,000 Rand, it must show in your reconciliations. Instead, they negotiate you as far down as they can. After telling channel that they give you 5 Rand, they say, okay, she demanded 5 Rand, and they come to you, they negotiate you down to 2 Rand. And then next, the 3 Rand gets pocketed. And it's even worse that some of the money that's left over is not used to make your life better in the working environment. And I think we, in South Africa, we've been working with some of the most substandard requirements. And without sounding funny, thanks to COVID, now people have to step up because they don't have a choice. Yes. There'll be inspections. If you're not going to have a clean environment, they will shut you down. If you're not going to have social distancing, they will shut you down. If people are not sanitizing, not wearing masks, they will shut you down. So now it's like indirectly we're thanking COVID for coming through, because now all of a sudden everyone has some breathing space. Now people are delivering things that we never thought they can ever get us to experience in our lifetimes.
You know, I think it goes back to what Lala was saying, that when we want to do something, we can actually do it. You know, you know, when some people choose not to do it. Bongi, I want to bring you in here, and this is perhaps something I'm also going to throw out to all my other panelists. Bongi, to you, what does it mean to be your sister's keeper in the industry?
Wow. I have issues with, especially now that I'm a senior editor, there's upcoming women who should be listening to me, but because, I don't know, I feel like they want validation from the male counterpart. I'm not sure, I don't make sense. And then there'll be just woman to woman crime. I really don't understand what that is all about, because being bold in this space, you have to be bold to be heard. You also have to listen to, like Ausrami said, your emotional intelligence. Whatever it is that you are feeling is what you need to speak about. As soon as you speak, you are labeled as something else. So being your sister's keeper just means that you need to understand, there is not much hierarchy, there shouldn't be anyway, when we are working as a team, and I think post-production is supposed to be a team place. But you also need to understand that you don't know much, and being told by somebody who knows much more than you, it's not abuse of some sort. It's not like I'm here keeping the seat for you to come take me out. We need to work together. Maybe because I've taken my time to get where I am, and the respect is just not there. And to become my sister's keeper is honestly to be honest to each other and understand what the point and the purpose of whatever it is that we are doing is, but we are not listening to each other. What it means for me is just, I will always tell you the truth. How you take it, honestly, you need to understand that somebody has been there before you, and this is why they are telling you. But there's a whole lot, I don't feel like I've had the respect that I would like to get from younger women, the way I have respected the ones before me. And maybe it's the education of understanding what's the purpose, the goal of I got a message on the screen, so I didn't know what that was. So we just need to understand why we are bold, why we are aggressive, why we have to say how we are feeling. And it's not because I'm Black and I'm young that I don't have a voice, and when I do have a voice, is to bring you down. I think it comes with the education, and we must all educate ourselves. What is your goal? What is your purpose? Why you are here? That for me will get all of us to grow. That's why I see most Black women in post-production not making it. I think it's egos. So yeah, I don't have the information. I do not have, I cannot educate much. I can only inspire, and inspiration can be painful. It shouldn't be, but the truth is, maybe because most people come here not really understanding what's the purpose of being bold, being outspoken. It's not just to be mean. I mean, I have not experienced that. I don't know.
Dr. Nabisa, let me bring you into this conversation. What does it mean to you to be your sister's keeper? And it's not, as much as you are not in the film and TV industry per se, but you work, you know, within gender and health research, and you know how much women need the support of other women, you know, because of the journeys that they travel, whether it's starting at the police station to report those cases and the way that they get treated at the police station, then going through the the justice system, you know, going through the court system, you know, in and out of court. And those can be very cold and clinical spaces that require a woman who's really supported, because there are times where it can get really hard and a woman can easily decide to give up simply because the journey is so difficult, you know, and that's how perpetrators walk. end up walking, because the justice system is almost set up to defeat the woman before she even starts.
Thanks, Kanye. It's a very difficult, it's a difficult question to answer in 2 minutes. So what I will try and do from what I've understood. Thank you. So what I'll try and explain from what I've gathered from the discussion so far is that the film industry is a microcosm of society, and I'll explain what I mean. So if we are looking at society and how it is organized, we find that our society is actually organized around a gender order that says that power of men and their dominance is institutionalized. And that means that they get the privileges that they accrue just because they are men. And we find ourselves in spaces where we have to contend with trying very hard to respond to these purported male needs for power, for presence, for recognition. And unfortunately, society has created a support system for this need for male dominance and power, which is a certain kind of femininity that I am seeing being discussed in this group, where we find that there's a set of women who are seen perhaps in some ways excusing negative male behavior, particularly sexual harassment, in many cases even perhaps condoning male power and the disempowerment and oppression of women. So when you're talking about production companies that may be creating uncomfortable situations that expose women, that says that there is, in a way, whether it is women working in that production or it is men, but the system is organized in such a way that women are put as secondary citizens compared to men, so that men can have their way and have their cake and eat it, so to speak. And another thing is that I heard from the conversation around issues to do with a sense of ownership over women's bodies, that it is okay to just have open spaces and not ensure privacy. And that may be because of, perhaps things were not really organized before, or because of the selfishness that Rani spoke to of some producers. But that's something that I want to say needs to change. And I'll tell you why. So the impact of violence and the sexual harassment on women is really is hard on women's mental health. So you may be talking about women being interpreted to be psychotic when they are highly stressed by the environment they're working in, and they're trying hard to find their voice and to express themselves, and they're shut down or undermined or scapegoated. And the industry needs to find ways, and I'm hearing that SWIFT is already doing that, which is good. But I want to add an approach that is called safeguarding policies against exploitation and abuse. And the safeguarding principles are really laying out for every individual that is working in the entire film industry, so that everybody takes ownership of their responsibility to ensuring that there's respect to women's bodies and women's art as well in the industry. And that needs to be done in a way where you also create safe spaces for them to raise their concerns, but also address the vicarious trauma that they may be exposed to, including when women, for example, portraying stories about violence, portraying stories where their bodies have to be exposed. And I know that there's some work that Lala was talking about, the kind of training that you already engaging the teams in, and that is important. But I want to also say that it is important for women in the industry, and starting with you guys, to actually be vocal and encourage everybody to stop excusing negative male behavior. It is inexcusable. There is no need to encase it in things like, no, she confused him. It does not matter. We need to stop excusing negative male behavior. We need to understand that women's bodies belong to themselves, and so we need to promote that. And so when women's bodies are exposed for the sake of industry, it needs to be done in a way that behind the scenes, there is the utmost respect for that body being used for art purposes. And I also want to say that we also need to encourage an active listening environment, as well as practice and deep democracy. And I am happy that you have this platform, because this is the beginning of actually talking truth to power. And it doesn't matter who is listening. What matters is that they must hear the message. And the message really is about taking this space and using it for good. And that is important. And I wanted to also say that, again, there needs to be mentorship of newcomers in the industry, and newcomers, not only women, but people regardless of their sexual orientation and regardless of their gender identity, as well as disability. And so it is important that we provide mentorship, but I would like to propose one of the things that we try and do in our work is actually gender transformative training of all the different individuals that are, the different positions that are working in the film industry. Because changing the gender attitudes and the gender norms is where we need to get to, whether in the film industry or outside, to be able to make the impact we need for women to be respected, for their voices to be heard, and for violence to stop. I'll stop there. Thank you so much. But we need also, before I stop, we need to take care of the mental health, and we need to pay for it. So I'm glad that whoever is, whichever production is active at that particular point in time, but there must be vicarious trauma treatment, but there must also be psychosocial treatment and support even for reporting as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nabisa. Let me bring you in, Lala. You mentioned in one of your opening comments that you took your team through for intimacy training, and you've heard Dr. Nabisa talking about the importance to actively engage, in some of these types of trainings for sense of awareness, because some people may not be aware that my behavior is offensive, but when they learn, when an expert or someone who has knowledge comes in and says, this may be, translated as a behavior that equates sexual harassment. And to you, you may have thought it's just cool, to pat a woman on her butt and say, hey, what's up? Because it's something you've always done. But because there's been no behavior correction, it continues. As a producer, for you, Lala, what does it mean to be your sister's keeper within that context?
Sure. It's a personal one, and there's a culture and a society that perpetuates this terrible behavior, and there's a strict bro code that we have to understand that is there, that exists, and what it means for me to be my sister's keeper is that I have to create opportunities for them. I have to, in spaces that they don't even know that exist, I have to fight for them. And I find myself doing that, and we need to be doing more of that. Advocate for each other, fight for each other. There are moments where you have to fight for people's salaries to go, but the counterpart, if it was a guy, what would they be earning right now? Those are uncomfortable conversations to have. And the minute you keep saying it all the time, you're then branded as, oh, here she comes, she's gonna ask us how many women have we procured? Because that's the first question I ask. As soon as we start to equip our team, I will then ask who, and I ask it directly. And I was afraid at first to ask until I realized who, if I don't do it in this particular space, who is going to do it? I then had to come forward to learn that in the most nicest way, with a smile, to go show me the list of the Black women that are going to play in this role. And then we obviously are confronted with there aren't any, there aren't enough, there's only a handful, they're in this production. Then I say we need to look at development, because that means there aren't enough of us being developed in particular areas. So to be my sister's keeper, and from a personal level, I then started what I called a break with LALA, understanding that there are young women in this space, in our industry, that need someone. When I was young, I knew no one in the space. When things happened to me, I could talk to no one, because when you knock at the door, you're confronted by a man who's not going to hear what you're saying. So I created a break with LALA that simply says they will from now on say, I know LALA. And I will make sure that they are protected, because to be your sister's keeper, you're going to protect them. You're going to speak for them. You're going to leave the door ajar for them. It doesn't help if I'm the only one sitting in that boardroom. We all have to make it there. So being my sister's keeper means that I will robustly, unashamedly call out your name to go, let's give her the job. Because we don't know how the broad codes work or how the guys club, they network. And we need to create our network. I need to lobby for you. Even if you're not there, I need to say, guys, I actually think the best person for this job is, and call you by name. And so for me, being my sister's keeper in this environment means that I need to protect you. There's a number of women that, whether through DM, social media, they will say, this is what's happening to me and I don't know who to speak to. If I know the producer, I call them and I call them out to go, let's not make them feel that way. You know, so the power dynamic is real. We need to fight for each other, whether we see it or not. We need to be calling things out, and we need to, you know, if we talk about my sister's keeper, I'm reminded by a verse in the Bible where, you know, God was saying to Cain, where's your brother? And I was like, am I my brother's keeper? So being a keeper is like, you don't be jealous of somebody, protect them, talk for, you know, let's create a sisterhood. That is what is going to see us through this, is to create a tight sisterhood that unashamedly, you know, supports each other, because we see it, you know, there is a culture of the guys doing that. So we need to create a strong network for ourselves.
Sanele, let me bring you in here. To you, what does it mean to you to be your sister's keeper?
Wow, Lala, you've said quite a lot, and I echo everything that you have said, I must say. To me, what it means, and firstly, I would like to just say, you know, give you this background. This is where I'm coming from. When I entered this industry in 1993, most of what women are experiencing now, we're experiencing then. We also had, I mean, the issues of race, gender, and ageism were there in 1993, and we're still experiencing it in 2020. That is part of the reason why I joined SWIFT in the first place, to say, I have been there, I've traveled this road, I have seen, how can I help women that are coming behind me, you know, to empower with them in terms of how they can navigate this. It is unacceptable that in over 26 years, we're still dealing with the same issues, you know. Being my sister's keeper, which is part of the reason why I joined SWIFT, is networking. We cannot, you know, emphasize that enough. There is power in the collective. We come, as Black women especially, from societies where our mothers belonged to stokvels, where they helped each other. And they did. It wasn't just about money. It was about empowering each other. It was about sharing what we call social capital today. We are not leveraging that as women. And that is very unfortunate, because we should be learning from the lessons of those women that have gone before us. So SWIFT allows us as women to come together to deal with issues. SWIFT advocates first and foremost, you know, in terms of creating the spaces that we're talking about now, creating safe spaces from sexual harassment, you know, safe and comfortable spaces for women. That's part of what we're advocating for. We're advocating for race, for gender, and pay parity. Yes, everything has been overshadowed by sexual harassment, and rightfully so. But those are some of the things that we do in terms of advocacy. We're advocating, we're engaging women. Come together. We have networking sessions, you know, we have different platforms where women can come together. We are also developing women. We have a subcommittee within SWIFT in terms of empowering women and developing them. That is a skills and mentorship subcommittee. And we're there to build each other up. That is what being my sister's keeper is that if you are lacking here and I have that experience and that knowledge, I should be lifting you up, because we collectively have to work together in order to advance our cause, you know, and in the process, not leave anyone behind. So that's what we're doing in terms of advocating and developing women. We are also saying and also, by the way, Kanye, to what you spoke to earlier, SWIFT represents and lobbies government. A lot of people don't know that we sit on reference groups. We're at this SABC working for women, representing women's interests. You know, right now, the Minister of Department of Labor, Employment and Labor, you know, they have a code of conduct that they're talking about, right? We as SWIFT are going to make submissions to make sure that that code of conduct is you know, we are able to give our input. We always see white papers that come out. We have to give input into these things. We do that at SWIFT, and we need, that is being our sister's keeper, making sure that there are policies, there are laws that protect women in the country, and that women themselves make the necessary contributions in terms of these amendments, you know, to these laws. Because if we want to be represented, our voices have to be heard. And SWIFT represents that voice of women on this platform, starting up there, as Lala said, with policy, change in policy all the way down. Another thing that I have to really point out is that criticism is a good thing for us, as provided that criticism is constructive and women then tell us, how can we do things better? Criticizing for the sake of criticizing doesn't get us anywhere. And we are very open as SWIFT, as being, that is you being your sister's keeper, coming to SWIFT and saying, SWIFT, you know what, you are missing this here. You may not be seeing what is happening here. Perhaps have a look at this. Dr. Nabisa has shared with us so much that we can do, you know. That is her being our sister's keeper by saying, please don't forget this and that and that as you formulate, you know, policies and come up with strategies with regards to your organizations. So we are not each other's enemy. Actually, we all have a common enemy. And Thandi spoke to it. We are the same, no matter how high up in the hierarchy you are. We are all subjected to the same thing as women. So we need to work and fight together. And the last thing I want to share, maybe last but one, that I want to share is that, you know, we have to be realistic. Yes, we ask women to come out to speak about these things. And when we say we're supporting them, what does that really mean, right? Where we have to be realistic with every woman that comes out is to say, we are behind you, we will support you. However, my sister, please be aware that from this point on, when you lay the charge, we can support you as much as we want, but you are now alone, you know, in this thing. So how are we helping you in terms of that last lap of the journey? We've seen with the case against Harvey Weinstein, we've seen with the case against Bill Cosby. Those women were in the dock by themselves. So we support them, but how else do we support them for that last lap so that they are able to take these complaints all the way through, right? This is the reality that we have to be open and honest about with them and empower them in terms of what then happens in that last lap when you lay a charge against somebody else. That is being your sister's keeper, you know? And lastly, how do I put this? We will only be able to overcome if all of us are informed about what really is happening. We all have to know what our rights are and what we can do. And that information is available for us. You can't wage war if you do not have the right arms to wage that war. And that information is on the SWIFT website. We've talked about it, the Code of Good Practice, the Sexual Harassment Guide, so that we're empowered to win this war. That's being your sister's keeper, is saying that's where you get information. That's where you should go so that you have, you know, what it takes to fight this battle. And I will leave it there.
Thank you, Sis Zanele. And you know, you raised very important points there to say there is safety in numbers, you know, and those rogue producers that we've been talking about, those that are, an island unto themselves. There's IPO, there's SWIFT, and there's many other organizations. And perhaps, to your point, to say SWIFT's involvement is also limited, and this is where partnerships with gender activist groups, people who actually have the capacity to walk with the person through the jurisdiction of the courts, through those areas. There are various NGOs that have the capacity, to do that. And I think that's where, the connection and the networking in industry, outside of industry, Dr. Nafisa, of course, I'm sure, has a great network of organizations that SWIFT in themselves can also work with, that can fill and cover that gap where you cannot reach, because there's only so much that you can do for yourself. Thandi, in that very spirit, as you also respond to the question of what does it mean to you to be your sister's keeper, you have a very big role as the deputy, chairperson of the Independent Producers Organization to bring in those rogue elements, to say, sisters, we cannot be caught, being rogue elements, let's also have a sense of being accountable, because being a member of, an organization to a certain degree means that you are abiding by what that organization stands for. And we need to be accountable, for this type of sets that we run as producers, as industry professionals. We cannot simply say that, it's every man for themselves. There comes a time where people have to be accountable. So within that, to you, what does it mean to be your sister's keeper?
Well, I think firstly, it's at making sure you get involved in organizations such as these, lobbying organizations that kind of try and represent the sector and the industry. Going into the IPO, one of the key things on me was all the gender issues were important to me. Seeing what the organization had done to date or what they weren't doing to date, and making sure that we walking through a process of these issues being important to all of our producers and becoming part of contracts, becoming part of our constitution, our code of conduct as producers is key. So the first thing is to go and step into those spaces, as I do, as Anela does, to go and step into those spaces where you can find and give voice, and where you can make sure that you are heard, and to do so with as many women as possible. It's not acceptable that we have industry organizations where there's one woman or two women sitting on a board of 12 people. It's not acceptable. But as women, we've got to step up, and we've got to say, I'm stepping up and into this role, and I'm going to have to fight and battle it, but I'm going to do that. Outside of industry bodies, I think we have to talk about what we do ourselves in our day-to-day lives. I'm at the IPO, I'm a volunteer member of the IPO, so this is time outside of my daily job. In my daily job, in terms of being my sister's keeper, there are a number of things that we are actively trying to do as a company. We have a slate of documentaries where we are only using females to produce, not to produce, to direct, to shoot, to make the music. Literally all of the technical aspects of what we do in this industry, and really kind of sitting down going, how many female composers are there on films in this industry? You don't know them. So let's make sure that as female producers, we hire female composers. That's important. I think it's important in terms of story, that as a producer myself, I'm looking at what scripts I am buying and developing. I'm looking at how we're representing ourselves on screen. I'm wanting to make sure that in 5 or 10 years' time, when a young man looks at a representation of a woman on screen, it is my representation. It comes with my voice. It is not a man's representation. So it's important for me as a producer to look at this in terms of every single point that I can, from script writing, who's writing those scripts. If it is a male scriptwriter, can I bring in a female scriptwriter to oversee those sex scenes and make sure they feel right and they feel relevant in terms of the way a woman would behave in that particular environment? And then, as I said, into what's very important is, it's one thing to be in front of a camera, but I think it'll be easier for women when they're in front of camera if they see more of us behind the camera. And that's when I say that, I mean that in terms of your DOP, your gaffer, your everyone. That we need to have more women that are behind the camera, so that when you are faced with the camera, behind that are people who are yours and belong to you. And I think that's key for me in terms of being my sister's keeper.
I like what you're saying, Tandy, that it's a sense of being more intentional about women development, being intentional and not just assuming that you're going to find the DOPs or that you're going to find the composers, but being intentional about developing them where there aren't any, instead of us just going to the default position of, oh, well, they're not there. Well, let's just go with who is there. Rami, just in before we close off, I want to end off with you on this particular section of what does it mean to be my sister's keeper, because I also want to position it this way for you. What does it mean to you to be a sister's keeper, given that you have done so many times at the risk of your own career, at the risk of not being able to work anymore, at the risk of being labeled a troublemaker, at the risk of being labeled somebody that's going to cause problems on production, at the risk of being blacklisted in the industry yourself?
Yeah, it's actually, I was actually laughing because listening to what everyone else was saying, I actually wrote it down that for me, being my sister's keeper is being intentional. And that's what you just said. And that's what Tandy was saying, that for me, talking about people, crew or cast, whatever, be intentional about the people that you bring on. Like even not being shy to ask, how many female directors do you have? How in terms of your crew, with the population in South Africa and the world over, we have more women than men. So that means it doesn't matter what field, more women need to be represented in almost all those categories and all those departments, and for me, be intentional. And being intentional is knowing as well the risk that you are running based on what you're prepared to stand for. Because when you don't stand for something, it has to start somewhere, and it's crazy how the women in the struggle, whether it's economic struggle, whether it is political struggle, whatever it is, it keeps rotating. But right now, I also feel that our biggest struggle right now, it is also now even bigger in the entertainment industry, where someone needs to say, I will say what is needed to be said. I will stand for what I believe is right. It doesn't matter whether I get blacklisted, whether I lose my job, whether I get fired, whether people don't want anything to do with me. But we need to be able to be those kind of sisters that we're prepared to lay it all on the ground. They can't fire all of us. They can't shut all of us down. They can't blacklist all of us. The funny thing is that one of the jobs that I lost, I got fired on the Thursday, then I got hired the following Monday. So much for being blacklisted. But being intentional and knowing that when you protect and when you stand for the integrity of what we are trying to achieve, then it means that the walls and the foundations, they're so strong that the generations that come behind us, they don't have to work as hard as we had to. We need to break that chain. We need to break that cycle. We need to bring something new. We need to bring something fresh. We are raising a generation of fearless women, a generation of opinionated women, a generation of women that are prepared to go into any form of sphere you can ever put in front of them. Women that are now saying that, I know traditionally it's a man's job, but you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm loving being a pilot. I want to do that. I want to go to the moon. I want to be all of those things. So for us to get to achieve all of that, we need people, or we need a band of women who are brave enough to say, it doesn't matter what I get to eat at the end of the day, but I've managed to walk through and put a stamp on what I believe in, so that the people that come behind me, they don't have to be worried about being blacklisted, being fired, and all of that, because all of this, as we go and learn, it helps to also bring and build on principles and bring and work and build on some of the structures that we will stand on, especially in the entertainment industry. So we will have a lot of sacrificial lambs, and it is okay to be be intentional about it, and don't go like, oops, I didn't see that it was going to turn like that. Every time I open my mouth, I'm like, let's hear. I wonder who's going to say what, but it is fine. It is the intention. We need to be able to shake the table, shake it until the wheels and the legs fall off. But we need to get to where we need to get to without compromise, without fear, and without being worried about being targeted or victimized in any way. So being a sister's keeper, we might not see it in 2020, we might not see it in 2025, but somewhere along the line, somewhere down the line, there's that thing, it's called, I call it the Indian and Jewish principle. I mean, it's not like, what's this, kind of king, where the Indian market is, man,
Plaza.
Rental plaza. Yes, because it's most of the shops they're Indian shops. Can I tell you something? If you walk into shop number 1 and you say, I want this, and they don't have it, they don't go, oh, sorry, we don't have it. They're like, wait here. They make 5 phone calls. So it is only when they get to the 7th supplier, when they realize, oh, no, we really, really do not have it. I also want a band. I want to see a band of women, an army of women who are able to say, before you can even call a guy and ask them to be a supplier of a particular service, find out if, call Tandi, call Bongi, call Kanye, call Zanele, call Nobisa, call Lala. Only when none of us can do it, like, okay, fine, let's phone Tembake. Like, what can we do? I want that. We must be able to be intentional about it. The boys have always had their club. We have had our clubs as well. But now we need to completely take it over to the point where even me as an actress, there are days where I'm going to choose and say, I know that production company, they're doing good work and everything, but based on the ratio of the women they have or they don't have, I don't feel comfortable in working for a company that is so that is excluding other people or other genders, especially females. Do you understand? So yeah, be intentional and be strong about it. You'll get knocked left, right, and center, but we push on and we will do it. We're going to win, Oksalai.
Ladies, that's where we ended off this afternoon. It's been an incredible conversation. I think I've certainly learned a lot, and I thank you for sharing yourselves and your time and your areas of expertise. As she opened for us, Dr. Nafisa, just in 2 minutes in closing and just wrapping it up, just give us 1, 2, 3 points that we can use even in our own spaces to identify somebody that may need help, somebody that may be too scared, just to come forward, whether, irregardless of which organization we're representing right now, but just as women, how sometimes we may see the signs and miss them because we're so busy going about our business. Maybe just wrap it out today to say part and parcel of being your sister's keeper is knowing when she needs help. Dr. Nabisa, are you there?
Yes. So Kanye, I think that what is important is, like I said, that we need to find ways to appreciate the mental health impact that violence has. And violence does not have to be only physical and sexual, but also being undermined and being belittled, like Bongi was talking. And also there is also ways in which people sometimes consort with others to pull women down. And that also is important. And so I wondered, in other industries, you find that there is a wellness program that is developed for people working in that particular industry. I wonder if that would not be a way to help support people who are working in the industry, regardless of where they are in the value chain, by creating those kinds of spaces where they have people that they can talk to. Because the challenge with the industry, as far as I understand, and I understand very little, is that there is a lot of independence and very few people who take accountability for the person they hire for that particular job. And I think that's where the insecurity comes in, not the personal insecurity, but the physical insecurity of one's job. And that's where the problem is, because that's where the exploitation finds itself able to actually be escalated in various ways. And that's where women's voices are actually undermined and diminished. And I think that as SWIFT continues and other bodies continue to devise ways to create a safeguarded space, I'll continue to use that word because I want it to resonate with you guys, is that we need to look at ways in which you find spaces where women in particular, where they have a place where they can, either make a call, they can send a message, whether they have money or not, because as startups, I am sure that some of them have very little means to make it. And so that also becomes the issue, because the lower you are in the ranks, that's where it is easier for one to be exploited. And hence, I've been talking about the younger or newer people in the industry. So there are many creative ways. And I think perhaps another way to make sure that there is a contact is actually having a proper referral system for reporting harassment. And harassment being able to unpack it in ways that even the smallest, a comment, which may seem harmless, like Rami was also saying, actually isn't harmless, because that's where the intimidation comes in. And being able to actually outline how the violence systematically comes in and becomes a part of one's existence as they enter into a production or whatever part of the industry they're working in. Because it is always about, this is the way things are done here. It is always about, no, you can't object, because remember, your job, we're not sure about your job. Maybe starts at casting also, in different ways in which people actually get brought into the work, and how we then make all of those different stations in the value chain take responsibility. Because it's very difficult for me to know exactly how the industry would work, but I know that a system that allows for women to find various means to access help is important. And when you budget for production, when you budget for any other activity you get involved in, please put money for counseling services, because perhaps that may be the only place a young woman may have to actually get the kind of space to be able to communicate and to share their pain and their anger. And again, another issue is the risky antisocial behavior that sometimes comes out of the stress that people have been through. And that also needs to be also taken into account, and where we can find ways to refer people early on, because you can see if people party and over enjoy themselves at parties, that's also, putting them at risk in a way where they find themselves at the mercy of people who have transport to take them home, if there's, celebrations taking place in different places and all of that. And so trying to minimize as much as possible the opportunity for them to be exploited and abused. I think that there are various ways you can do that. But I know that there's a good start, and I really commend the work that has already been started. I commend the voices that have been really, really, really making a mark. And it's good to see people behind the scenes, that they are actually active in also making sure that that happens, because we often think it is only those we see on TV in the front that are the only ones who are being vocal. And actually, I'm seeing that is not true. And I think that there's a lot that you have already done, but we still have a long way to go. And it's not only the film industry, but it's also our society, our communities as well. But what you are seeing is just, it seems much more amplified because of how small and compressed the environment seems to be. But actually, it is what's happening in other corporate industries, in other organizations, in other villages, in other townships, in other schools as well. Yeah.
Nobisa Shai, Tandy David, Bongi Malefu, Ramichwene, and LALA DUKU. You've been amazing. Thank you so much, ladies. I really appreciate you coming on board. To the NFVF, thank you so much for these critical conversations and just really championing the cause throughout the month. I think this has been a fantastic way to actually close off Women's Month, and I hope that these kind of topics will continue beyond Women's Month, because there's a tendency of thinking that these are only just for Women's Month. Let's have these conversations in September, in October, in every other month, and let's hope that in 5 years' time, a different panel will sit here and just do a recap on how far we've come, in the past 5 years, because of the work that has been started, by women like us. Have a fantastic weekend. Thank you so much, ladies. It's been an absolute pleasure being in conversation with all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Guys, none of these are going to work. Yeah. If this is going to be a hit, we need the right lead. So demeaning to pick a female lead this way. But people pay to see pretty people on screen. We need someone who's blatantly attractive, né? Someone like Drew Barrymore, but local and much, much younger. Okay. Someone like Lebu.
Lebu?
Yep. What? She's pretty but ordinary looking.
No, boss, I don't think I'd be the right
Work
one
with
for
me
that.
here, work with me. We need someone with Lebu's eyes. The secret is in the eyes. Everything is plain, but the eyes say, come hither. If we can find a girl with Lebu's boobs, that will be fantastic.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I want. Minus the pregnant belly, of course.
Finally, a breath of fresh air to revive the show. Come, let me show you where wardrobe is. Someone will come and help you shortly. Okay. I'm so happy to be working with you.
I'm not comfortable with this.
Oh, what do you mean? What did I do?
Please leave.
Bafo, uyizwile inkosazana ukuthi itheni? No negotiations.
Bafo?
What's along?
Okay.